one-heartedness and that full-heartedness of the joy of being here together. And I appreciate just being in community, being in this loving community, and seeing people's hearts smile, and just saying namaste as we salute each other, that the divinity within me salutes the divinity within you. And I was driving down the street, going very, very fast, like a plane flying low to the ground, driving. Oftentimes, in fact, the city of Rio Rancho has told me so. And I recall a time when I was driving parallel to our music director up in San Jose, and I rolled down the well, it's now electrical, but I rolled down the window, and I said, Michelle Jordan, Michelle, what are you doing? What's up? How are you this morning? And we're both driving to the center. And she says, I'm going to praise God. And how often do we wake up in the morning and say, that's what we're up to? Rather than just, I'm going to praise Spirit. Instead, maybe sometimes we wake up and we're going to fix something, or we're going to complain about something, or we're going to fight about something, or we feel that there may be something adverse, some power that is adverse, and rather than trusting as we step off and know that there's that hand to greet us as we're buoyant in the air, and knowing that there is, in essence, a safe landing, we're going to go praise Spirit. That's what we're up to. And wouldn't that be the great way to start every day? Not only today, as we leave here today, but to start every day. So to come from our greatness, and to know that in this month of disciplined dreaming, we have gone through various steps to, in essence, ask and prepare and discover and ignite. And today we're launching our even more expressive divine essence, to know that we're already prepared. And when I saw this space shuttle, I'd been at the Southern California Practitioner Conference, and it was when the space shuttle was piggybacked, much like this picture, was piggybacked and was coming up Crenshaw Boulevard, pulled by a Toyota Tundra, and it was pole dancing. They were cutting down poles as it was making its way up to Crenshaw Boulevard to the museum, to its final resting place. And at the same time that it was coming up Crenshaw Boulevard, and we were up on the top of Guidance Center, we were looking, and we had our cameras and our telephoto, and walking down to be in all the excitement of being amongst the people. And we could see that it was making course corrections and adjustments along the way as it was coming to its final destination. And so everyone was in celebration of its return, to have even more joy fulfilled for people and for kids to learn how things fly. So oftentimes we have to fly, and last night, in spite of what's going on, last night I was talking, and yesterday I was talking with some friends. And oftentimes we have loss and pain and grief in our life. And I had lost my dad when I was 15, and I had lost my mom when I was 35. And so found myself to be on my own, although supported with family and friends and thriving in what I was doing. What it did for me was it gave me a place to have spiritual practice, and I got to meditate. I turned to meditation and to having that inner insight and looking for that wisdom and looking for that creativity that was within me. And I found myself at a shopping center where there were like-minded people in a center for spiritual living. And so I ended up being a Chinese, I wasn't Chinese, but I was a I was a waitress at a Chinese restaurant where the Center for Spiritual Living was, and they had these big banners, these big kanjis that said something like, love and peace and understanding. And I always said that it was no shoes, no shirt, and no service. And so these like-minded people would come in, and we would talk about what was working for us in our practice to deepen our spiritual practice and have that connection with the source, with the loving source and that higher power. And so we got to go deeper and we got to go higher. And then I got to travel too. I traveled with people, and I got to be in connection with indigenous wisdom and bring through my New Thought upbringing that I grew up with on the breakfast table as a third-generation religious scientist. And In all humbleness, it's taken me places that I've done really well. I've traveled the world. I've traveled the country. I've done events for the governor and the president and all these kinds of things, and met all kinds of people in the cream of the cropness of life. And to share that connection, not only locally, but to share that, in essence, globally, and be in celebration and be in ceremony with this deep, deep inner connection. So to move through whatever that is in our life, whatever grief may be moving us toward our greater yet to be. I also became an all-American swimmer, and I enjoyed the camaraderie, I think, was more than just whatever, being that achiever, which has always worked for me, and it's worked really well, and surrounded myself, and not just inspiring myself, but it works well for me to help inspire others. And that's one of my inspirations. And to be in that camaraderie, to be in that connection. And due to that meditation practice, which I started over 35 years ago, and I'm only 29, so it's pretty phenomenal. But to have that undistractable attention on reality and having that calmness and that clarity, and to be, in essence, not something that you move in and out of, but it's just more of a way of being. And so in discussing how the spiritual practices work in this year of the power of spiritual living, and to know that when we experience the grief, it's not that we're just in a hole perfectly complete, it's that we're whole, perfect, and complete. We're not in a hole, perfectly complete. You know how we have this jargon or these sayings in New Thought? We're not in a hole. We're in this place where we are whole. We are whole, and we are perfect, and we are complete in that. And we don't have to be perfect, because one of the definitions of perfection is that it's all that there is. Perfect would be all that there is. There's the allness of the all-encompassing God. And I am totally okay with a B+, and to let ourselves off the hook. And next month we'll be moving into fasting from in letting be, letting go, and to fast from negative thoughts, negative people, negative experiences. Not that any of us have any of those, but to fast from that. And so at the center, when I was waitressing at the Chinese restaurant, I learned that God is love, and to just show up and love each other. I also learned that the Father and I are one, and that there is the oneness, there is the one heart, there is the connectedness, there's all those colors of the rainbow of our experience, all of those colors. So through those years of meditation and all those other spiritual practices, self-hypnosis, and we have a self-hypnosis workshop on Thursday night starting up. Self-hypnosis, and those really are those affirmations. What is life affirming in my life? I went to community colleges and I took a self-hypnosis class, and here we have this, it's happening right now and right here, available to us. But it's just a matter of me stepping up to access it, to make a declaration and claim that it is this greater good, and to be at peace, and to know that peace truly is this natural state. So in the friendliness of that state, in the meditation, I have minimal self-talk of, bring your tennis shoes, or you dummy, or, whatever that mind chatter is. I really have minimal amount of that. And through that, it's a way where we can have that connection be even more clear, and to eliminate whatever that static is. So there's a positive difference that's happening here and now. And I know that in this community, we have people who have lost children. I know that we have people who have been experiencing less than optimal health. I know we have people who have been raped. I know that we have people who have been robbed. I know that we have people that have been in foreclosure. Their kids have been on drugs. I know that we have a lot of grief. I know that there's people who have told the spouse that they don't love them anymore, or they've been told that as well. There is loss. And years ago, I took a workshop actually with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, about growing through loss. And so we grow through that, and we launch into something new. And we set that new intent. And I remember my third grade teacher, Mrs. Bethel. She said, make sure your brain is in gear before engaging mouth. So that in our spiritual practices, in meditation, we listen to that insight, or we have that far-sightedness, much like the space shuttle, to see that, yeah, there may need some course corrections as we go up whatever that boulevard or avenue of experience is. And I know that culture sometimes teaches us that we can launch things, our culture may be launching things where we step over people or on people, heaven forbid, on people, that we step on people, or that we have to diminish others in order for us, or that something has, in order for us to have full expression, that something needs to be different or more or better. But that there's something that needs to be eradicated. And sometimes maybe the cultural prayer or the thinking, that cultural collective thinking might be about the highest and farthest good, not the highest and best good. It's something that we like to be far from, the highest and farthest, to be in whatever that whole might be. It could be like traffic on Paseo. Paseo Boulevard it doesn't realize for us sometimes that peace is our true natural state. And in aviation, there's a couple tools to rely on that we can apply in daily life. So ours is of a practical spirituality. It's of a nature where we can get back to realizing that peace, that as we launch peace more and more, we can get back to a peaceful state. So in two ways of two spiritual tools for transformation. In aviation, skilled pilots, and it's about this practical spirituality and about having the skill and art of peaceful living. There's instrument flying rules. There's IFR, and then there is visual flying rules, VFR. So there's one by instruments that you don't necessarily look at what's in your window, but you can rely upon as a guideline. And then there's also visual flying. So pilots use whatever technical systems and gauges that they have available to them, and along with their own sight and insight. And we rely on our own sight and insight as well. So we can relax and know, in essence, that this Boeing is going. We're already on this plane. This Boeing is going somewhere. And imagine that there's a pilot that's approaching landing, and she realizes that there's a strip that's really only 200 feet below, whereas the instruments tell her that she's 2,000 feet away. So we'd anticipate that the pilot would use her sight and insight to land safely, and to, rather than just blindly following whatever gauges were indicating, and which could cause a crash to the ground. Whatever that crash may be in whatever area of our life. But in our lives, how often do we experience just the opposite of that, relying on our sight and our insight, and to get back to using the tools of meditation and affirmation and having that sight from within come forward, or having us look around and acknowledge and notice and make whatever that course correction is. So rather than flying on instruments or whatever those policies or guidelines, or the way that we've always done it, might be the stone tablet moving into whatever technology might provide more efficiency to us, might be at hand. So there could be a way that we would crash, or we might lose our precious assets, such as friends, family, customers, our greater community, our neighbors. What if we trusted talented people, and not only including ourselves, but if we trusted people to experience from their insight, to share their experience from their sight, from their viewpoint? What if we trusted people, and in our lives we can fly with both that IFR and that VFR and fly this friendly skies? We can fly and launch and also harvest this new era of creativity in our lives. And Dr. Ernest Holmes, who is the founder of Spiritual Living, he provided us with inspiration, and he also said at the same time, inspiration without application is hallucination. And sometimes hallucination may come from what we're seeing. It may come from what we've thought. It may come from that self-talk that we want to minimize, and we want to maximize the spiritual talk on our life. And how we can show up as this inspiration and apply it in our area of work, apply it in our families, apply it if we talk with the IRS, hopefully not, but as we do the drive-up teller, as we're in everyday life. And there's a Nipun Mehta who I attended a lot of his meditations up in the Bay Area. Nipun Mehta, and you could Google it too if you don't have a flip phone. You could, if you don't have a flip phone, you could Google him. His nephew was listening to him talk about flying from this perspective, about having the insight and bringing forward that viewpoint of spirituality, bringing forward that experience of the connection of the one, and being in that depth of just hanging out, knowing that, yes, there is the support of the friendly skies, no matter what the travels look like. And so his nephew decided to have a car wash. He listened to his uncle talking about, we live in a friendly, generous universe. And you know those super soaker things that you have, summer fun, and they've got these big, like bazooka looking like super soakers. These 10-year-olds, 10, 12, 11-year-olds decided to have a super soaker car wash for free. How much fun is that? And people would drive up and they would say, wow, is this a fundraiser? How come you're doing this? And the 10-year-old would just say, we're just sharing generosity. We're just sharing. Come on by. And what a delight that is to just practice that generous kindness of that one heart. There was also a house of two gang members between two gang folk, and there was an experience of whatever scarcity of that loss and grief and pain that was going on, whatever that woundedness was. And there was one neighbor in the neighborhood between these two neighborhoods that said, look, we have enough. We have enough to share. We have a tree in our backyard, and it's bearing fruit. So rather than having it just fall to the ground, or rather than it having anything go to the birds in our life sometimes, and rather than having it just be picked up or not be used, what this neighbor did was connected with his other neighbors. And he said, you have a lot of fruit in your backyard, and we can pluck them. We can pluck them and give them to the other neighbors who would like to have those and who may not be experiencing that delicious low-hanging fruit that's on their kitchen table. To share in the bounty, to say, look, we have these fresh, organic, nutrient, nourishing fruit, apples and pears and cherries. And I brought some from my backyard, and there's enough for everybody here, and I'll just leave them here. In fact, what they did was they went around and they gathered all these bags as they went throughout the neighborhood and shared the bounty and circulated their generosity. So that's our gift and our homework, actually. We have a garden corner here at High Desert. We're actually doing this already. Did you know that we had a garden corner? We have a garden corner, thanks to the gardening team here. And people, it's in the social hall, people can share the bounty. We have a garden here, and then people are also bringing from their own garden. We also are moving into some community outreach into the greater community and practicing in our intentional giving in our spiritual practice. You'll hear from Nancy Henson next week in how there's certain nonprofit partners that we're partnering with as far as our hands-on and heart-filled service and being of that generous nature. So you'll hear more from Nancy on that next week. And I also did that this week with the two Unity ministers who were in our backyard. And I said, hey, let's collaborate. We can have an alliance. If you have a guest who's coming to town, we can share in the bounty of that good. And so there's the flying of the friendly skies of that being built as far as bridges being built. And knowing that there is this power of positive living, not only on Paradise Boulevard or Paradise Hills or Rio Rancho, but in the greater Albuquerque area. There is the greatness that is happening. Tom Zender, who's the former president of Unity, gives us a formula for this. So this would be a good take-home for us. And we can look at what we want to stop in our life. We want to stop not sharing those fruits and letting them fall to the ground or letting the birds fly away with them. Or my dog is actually using one as like a ball. And so she'll go out and, it's a great, easy entertainment for her. But we want to stop not sharing. What do we want to put to an end in our life? What do we want to, and we'll go through this next week, release and let go of? What do we want to suspend? There may be something that we may just want to set aside, put it in the parking lot, rather than being on our dashboard. We may want to put something on our parking lot and say, yeah, we'll get back to it and tend to it later. And we know that we also have seasons that we're in harvest season right now because of what's been planted. We may also want to look at what we want to sustain. There is something that is working. What is working in our life? We want to continue that. What do we want to continue that's working? And then we also want to take a look at, hey, it's time to launch something new. It's time to start. It's time to take whatever that new initiative is and whatever that area is. Maybe it is meditation and getting back to the inner stillness wherein all the answers come forth. And there's another experience that happened too. There was a gentleman named Julio Diaz, and this was in New Jersey. He was boarding a subway, and there was a teen who came up with a knife and says, I want your wallet. So he complied and gave the wallet to the kid, and as the kid began to run away, Julio said to the kid, it's cold. Would you like my jacket? And the kid said, yes. The kid stopped right in his tracks, and he said, they don't teach this in Robbery 101. He stopped and he said, yes, I'm cold. And so Julio gave the kid the jacket. And he also said, I'm hungry. I was just about to go get something to eat at this cafe across the street. Would you like to join me? And the kid said, yes. And they sat down at the table and they had a heart-to-heart connection. And they dined together. And Julio said, well, I was going to pay for our meal, but you have my wallet. So the kid gives the wallet back. And then Julio said, may I have your knife too? And the kid gave him his knife. So there's a song that the Agape International Spiritual Center, Ricky Byers-Beckwith and Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith wrote, that says, God is in the darkness, God is in the light. See me if you can, everywhere I am. So God is in the darkness of what we want to stop. God is in the light of what we want to sustain and start. See me if you can, everywhere I am. Everywhere I can launch that which is something loving and beautiful and kind and compassionate and forgiving and thoughtful, and that which is harmonizing. There was a Georgia family who had spent about $15,000 getting ready for the daughter's wedding. And about 40 days prior to the wedding, the daughter told her parents that she was not going to be getting married. Now, I don't know the reasons why. We never knew the reasons why. But there was no ability to cancel. And can you imagine having all of that arrangements? And what the father wanted to do, he just, needed to call the place and say, I need to get this behind me. We need to move along, and I need closure. I need to come to completion with this and free up my time, free up my energy, because it's not productive for me. And can you imagine having a catered dinner at one of these places, like, when you have full potatoes in your mouth, like full, the people in Connecticut that talk, the potatoes in your mouth, like at Connecticut, it was at Villa Cristina, it was this very fancy dinner, very fancy dinner, and it was very, however many course meals for $15,000 for 200 adults and 50 kids. What happened was the father made a phone call to Hosea's shelter, and they thought it was a prank call. Can you imagine getting a call saying, we have a dinner for 250 people, and we want your homeless shelter folks to come over. And it was a shelter of people who may have had a temporary situation, loss of job due to an illness or whatever it was, getting back on the feet. And there were buses that came and picked them up. And they sat down at the very fancy place, Villa Cristina, and had this delicious meal of salmon or chicken. What would you like? What would you like? And the kids had fun too. They had one of those bouncy, fun, blow up things where you bounce, and they had chicken fingers, and they had Jell-O, and all kinds of celebration and toys. And so there was beauty. There was beauty in that, what could have been a bitter situation. And the bride came. And what could have been a bitter situation showed up in the sweetness of closure for her, in the sharing and this generosity of launching that, instead of staying on the tarmac and saying, sorry, we're canceled. And what even happened after that was Villa Cristina now has an agreement with some of the other nonprofit groups to accept any other food overage that comes from some of the hotels in the area, in that ritzy area. So do not underestimate the impact that we have when we launch something new. There was an impact not only for the bride and her father, for that whole family, but there was an impact for 250 people. There was an impact for the business that now has that connection, and they made that connection in the greater community, much like we'll be doing here at the center. So we take our wisdom from where we can get it, whether it's Buddha, whether it's Hafiz, whether it's Rumi, whether it's Dr. Ernest Holmes, who really never wanted to start an organization, but he wanted to share the synthesis of his knowingness about how we can be inspired and apply this philosophy as a way of living, apply this way of living. And I was at the Isotopes game on Thursday, and lo and behold, we were sitting next to some holistic doctors. And they started sharing about how there's cleansing and fasting, and you can do these kinds of practices and all these kinds of practices in your life. So there we were at the Isotopes game, right behind home plate, listening to our holistic health, our way of living. It's here for us. It's here for us and echo and resonating in our hearts and echoing in our experience. So next month, as we launch into our month of fasting, letting go and letting be what's not serving us, and launching something new, launching whatever that is that's so empowering, so welcoming, so true to our hearts, that we can be an inspiration and apply that and be like Michelle, who I was riding along beside, saying, hey, we're off to Praise Spirit this morning. We're off to be there. We're off to be there. And I want to end you not only with the affirmation card that we can take home. We have an affirmation card every month that we can say together. Let's do our affirmation. All right, so I invite us to say together. You ready? You ready to launch? Ready to launch into something new? Ready? I now let go of everything and enter into the consciousness of that which we believe. The spirit within each of us is God, and it is perfect, it is love, it is limitless and perfect and complete and whole. It knows no lack and no limitation. And so everyone's saying, and so it is. But I also want to end you with one of my favorite biblical quotes from Winnie the Pooh, when Christopher Robin says to Winnie the Pooh, so you are braver than you believe. You are stronger than you seem. You are smarter than you think. And so I invite us to all launch into something new. And I just invite us as the practitioners stand and rise up in this invitation to fly the friendly skies of that which is creative and brilliant and that which is new and fresh, So being in the freshness of this refreshing, infinite presence, knowing that there is the presence and power which absolutely allows us to glide along the way, that it is in fact everywhere present. It is the pure potentiality and possibility of spirit, knowing that it is, in essence, in flight already, and riding on the waves of the current of the air, knowing that there is enough air to go around. There are enough stars to be inspired to. There is the inner wisdom, the insight which we bring to our sight. And knowing and acknowledging and realizing that, knowing that there is the complete unity of the wholeness, that being in this wholeness and wellness, there is well-being in this connection and unity and oneness. So being in this loving oneness, being in the one and one with the one in the heart of spirit, knowing that there is the deep and profound connection no matter what. And it shows up, yes, as optimal health. Yes, it shows up as the harmonizing prosperity. It shows up as the loving and kind and thoughtful relationships. And bringing our insight and looking around and knowing that it shows up and surrounds us in the friendly skies of life, being the inspiration and inspiring others in the generous nature of the universe, and being a conduit and a portal where that resides, and knowing that there is no need to have it be dormant anymore, that it just rises up and allows itself to be accepting and realizing itself in all of its fullness. For this I am very grateful in the wisdom and the knowingness, and being the best, the very best ever, the highest and best. And I release this word into the action of the law, knowing it is carried forth on the friendly skies, buoyant and free and full, in the fullness of freedom. And so be it, and so I celebrate, and so it is.